Hey, everybody who's online, we'll get started in about 2 minutes, just a few moments. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 12 o'clock, and go ahead and get started on time. And we'll make a brief introduction, and we'll turn it over to our guest speakers. So thanks for joining us online. We got a good attendance so far, and I know we'll get some more joining in here shortly. We made this one a web-only session, so appreciate you guys joining in remotely. I've been kind of laid up for the last week, recovering from an eye operation. So I am laying down on the job today, but as they say, the show must go on. So fortunately, got two great speakers lined up to present. So my introduction here is going to be very brief. We typically do a few intro slides of what's coming up. I will say that our March session wound up being kind of late this month. March has been a pretty busy month here in New Orleans between Mardi Gras, and then we had a training class in the room, and then a then manager session last week. So I kind of bumped us here towards the end of March, but we'll get back on track next month in April, about our normal middle of the month schedule, with a topic around SIP security, which will be a great presentation as well, with Luis Ramos joining us again in April. And then in May, we'll go to View SE, a little View SE version 11 update. So a couple good topics coming up after today. So with that, I want to introduce our two guest speakers. Matthew Masrick, hopefully I pronounced that right, Matthew. I'll let him introduce himself and his role, as well as Luis Ramos, our solution architect out of Houston, who happens to be in Cleveland this week with Matthew. So with that, I'll let you guys take it from here and introduce yourself. Thanks, Matthew.
Sure, thank you, Wayne. As Wayne said, my name is Matt. I'm here in Mayfield Heights, Ohio, so I am the marketing manager for design software for Rockwell, and that's really the commercial lead for anything in the design space. So we're going to talk today a lot about Studio5000 and a lot about Logix Designer, but it also includes the rest of the Studio family, so Architect and View Designer, but as well as Factory Talk Links and Links Gateway, the newest acquisition, Emulate 3D, and Control Flash Plus, anything that you use in that pre-build design phase. So I put together a bit of an agenda here. It's pretty full, so I hope I'll go through as much as I can. I want to spend a little bit of time on what's the broad overview and priorities for Studio5000, so it kind of sets the stage not just for V32, but beyond. And then we will dig into Studio5000, which is, of course, Logix Designer V32, but even a little bit on Application Code Manager, what's the rest of that family update look like, View Designer as well. And then a few Studio5000 and even a couple surrounding software pieces and pending releases over the next couple months. And then we'll end on digital engineering, which there's enough topics in V32 and 33 and 34 that's becoming a cornerstone of design software. So I'll spend a little bit of time on that and weave in some of the newest features and why they're in a separate conversation on this digital space. So I mentioned when we say V32, I think most of the time we're talking about Logix Designer, but I'm going to talk about the whole Studio5000 environment. So they do release separately, but they try and release as close as we can from a timing standpoint together. So you do have Architect, your Canvas, your system level view, a Logix Designer, which is your our bread and butter of your PLC design space, View Designer for your HMIs, Application Code Manager, which now we'll talk about is on its third version already. This is where you're replicating and storing and cataloging your code. The Studio5000 Logix emulates, so now we're going to talk a lot about the rise of the emulated controller and what that means from a simulation standpoint. And then the newest addition here that will probably be news to everyone is simulation interface. So new this summer, a new piece of Studio5000. We'll talk about where that fits and what it delivers. So at a very high level, the current state and future priorities for Studio5000 that you can expect to see in V32, which we'll talk about, but also what you can expect in V33 and beyond. We've seen productivity and security be the underpinnings, the major core part of a lot of the development in various Studio versions, and that'll continue. So we'll talk a lot about security today. Productivity is always a part of the releases, and I'll say that we're focusing a lot right now on how do we not necessarily add more to the design environment, but what can we take away? So what kind of click can we minimize? How much rework can we eliminate, and how can we simplify? So I think productivity is not just tool additions. A lot of it's meaning taking out rework and taking out unnecessary steps. And then you'll see kind of in V32 and beyond this idea of digital design, which of course we've had emulated controllers before, but now as we start to see AR and VR and virtual commissioning and these topics, digital twin, these topics become more and more prevalent, that's going to become a key part of design, the design suite moving forward. So I'll talk a lot about that. And then I don't have any features outlined for V33 today since we just got through V32, but I can say that you'll see more focus, especially in V33, focused on process applications and making process a big piece of Studio5000 moving forward. So with these priorities, if we overlay, what does that mean from a brand product? What's the tangible pieces that are coming out? In V32, we saw expansions on the ability for our customers and our users to protect their intellectual property, protecting their source code and their execution code. Logix Emulate, bringing up to V32 and compatible in version 32. More data exchange capabilities. So now it's not enough to just work within Studio, but now we're actually seeing that you do expect that when you're designing in ePlan or Autodesk, you should also be passing some data back and forth to your PLC team and to your electrical team. I mentioned ACM 3.0, which I'll dive into, and then Control Flash Plus is the newest iteration or the evolution of Control Flash. So if you're not using that, I don't have a slide on it, but highly recommend you using or taking a look at Control Flash Plus as your multi-device fleet management for firmware. It's in its second version now, just released as well. So after the V32 release, there are a couple pieces that you'll see come out throughout the year. That's why I kind of have them after V32. But late next month, we're gearing up for Factory Talk Policy Manager, which is your administration console. I have a slide on that, so we can go into it. But your administration of security and SIP security and device-to-device level encryption. Emulate 3D, so the newest acquisition that certainly didn't align with V32, but to talk about where Emulate 3D fits in from a design portion standpoint here today. And then SIP security is software and hardware, but the adoption of SIP security throughout our devices, and then simulation interface, which is launching this summer. So they're not features and they're not very specific, but I just want to let this team know that we do know we have plans that somewhere in the near future, we have a next-gen Emulate environment. So we have Logix Emulate today. We know that there's some features that our users have been asking for quite a while. So to keep an eye out in the near future, certainly ask your technical community and your Rockwell community about when can we hear more about next-gen Emulate. So, and then the other thing that a lot of users have been waiting for, and we know that has to come, is the L8 redundancy. So I put that on there as well with an asterisk that I didn't put a date on there, but you know that that's in the near future. So very high level, but that's what you can expect from software in the next couple of releases. So if we do go into version 32, so now I'm talking specifically about Logix Designer, there's really five major things we saw come out of this, and this could be a whole deck on itself, but just at a quick summary, so the introduction of extended data types and 64-bit math that comes with it. Tag-based alarming that came out really in 31, but enhancements and expansion of that. New function block diagram functions, which is has a lot of usability and to talk about simplification in both troubleshooting and using. And then there's a whole slew of productivity enhancements that I'll walk through a couple of the major ones, but certainly there's more that I can't include in just this deck. And then I'll touch on phase manager support as well, something that certainly process markets have been asking for. So that first one, I just try to summarize here that with extended data types, so we do now in compact Logix, so the 5380 or the 5580 control Logix, the ability to calculate precise values or use values with higher resolution is something that our customers have been asking for. So the addition of what you see here in yellow, unsigned short integers, long reals, unsigned long, all those new data types that enable higher resolution, larger values, more precision, especially when it comes to any protocols that have certain requirements around values and like the example here given is hard. So that's in version 32, compact and control Logix. You would select it just like you do any other data type, but version 32 required. So tag-based alarming that came out in version 31, expanded on in version 32. So this is where you're actually associating a tag, an alarm with a specific tag. And here the example is a screenshot that we have. So if I look at a tag PV XIC 500, I can see that on a per tag basis on the far right there that I know that that tag has 5 different alarms associated with it. And then if I go into my alarm manager, I can see all of those alarms associated with that tag. So here I have a fail, high, low, and a low alarm all associated with that tag. In addition to the management, the library management of that, you also have this new operation, the ASO, your alarm set operation. So now I can actually issue a specific operation to all alarm conditions in a set. So examples here, make acknowledge, unshelf, reset, suppress, unsuppress. And I have an example here where I have that actually in a rung in my code. So ASO, the new alarm set operation in version 32 for tag-based alarms.
And for anybody that's asking, so this is something that we added in 31. We've talked about it in the past in the user groups. So with an L8 and the 5380 controller as of V31, they added Logix tag-based alarms. So this is the functionality. This is now an upgrade essentially to the feature set that was introduced in 31 that we now support in 32 to get you the same feature set that you would have at the HMI level, but now inside of the controller and being pushed from the controller to the HMI.
Exactly. Yep. Function block functions. So this is a new piece that has a couple of different dynamics to it. So the first one being that new functions and function block diagrams that are both a canvas and a UI upgrade as well as some memory allocation. So it's more symbolic rather than seeing that the whole block, which leads to a smaller canvas, more white space rather than trying to troubleshoot and look at every single block. You can see it a little quicker. You could see these are drag and drop with minimal or no additional configuration from that, which is a big improvement. And then finally, the memory allocation is different because it doesn't actually require a backing tag. So you have more intuitive symbol-based functions. It's a smaller footprint on the canvas, has no backing tag required, and you see here the compare, compute, boolean, all the standard logic instructions. So I have a note here that this is for the, let's say, the 8 series, so compact 8, 5380, 5480, and 5580 controllers only, and then version 32. Productivity, this could be a whole deck here. I'd really encourage you to go take a look at either the release notes or a more comprehensive deck that one of your distributor specialists or Luis could provide for you. But I did want to highlight a couple here because it's about minimizing reclicks and really simplifying the workflow. So, for example, online editing, especially on UDTs and tags that are on scan. So with UDTs, as long as you design your UDT with excess memory allocated towards it, then while you're online later, you can rename those unused members in your UDT that you've already allocated without a download required. And similarly, tags that are on scan, whether it's Logix Designer, FactoryTalk Links, or your panel view, you can rename the tags that are on scan. So a couple of controller organizer improvements. One of the biggest requests was we're doing the same task over and over and over again. for the same things. We know that we need to have multiple selections, and usually we're copying and cutting and pasting those. And you also need to be able to delete and then export and import multiple selections as well. So you see that in your controller organizer. And then similarly, I have a screenshot here as if I'm going to be doing some deletion from my IO tree, I want to be able to do that nested delete. So here in this example, I have an EN2T, and it prompts me and says there's six sub items here that you've created in your IO tree. Are you deleting the parent? Do you want to delete the rest of the nest? I say yes. Now I've deleted that whole nested structure out of my IO tree rather than having to do it every single time, one by one. So last major piece of version 32 I wanted to highlight was the phase manager support. So this had been something that's been requested quite a bit, is that this was for a while still restricted to the 7 series with compact guard, control Logix, all the 7 series controllers. So in version 32 and with version 32 firmware, now this is open to the phase manager and phase instructions for 8 series controllers. So 5380 and 5580 controllers with V32 firmware and V32 software. So that's at a really high quick level version 32. There's a comprehensive list of all of the other features, particularly around productivity. It's all captured in the release notes that have been out now for a few months. So I'd encourage you to take a look at it. If there's anything you need deeper, I'm sure we can go deeper on that. So outside of Logix Designer, but still in the Studio family, so Studio5000 Application Code Manager. It's a 3rd version, so doesn't have the same decades-long trial as Logix Designer has. But if you do look at replicating and reusing code, deploying standardized code across your company, this has been one of the biggest tools for especially any OEMs or people that are managing a fleet to say it's not enough to just have individual engineers writing code. We want to know that every time one of our field service engineers go out, they see the exact same way that the code is written across their company. And from a project standpoint, we want to be able to deploy it quicker without having to reinvent the wheel every single time. So Application Code Manager is your library. It's where you're cataloging. You're either using our libraries, Plant PAX or Machine Builder libraries, or you're creating and cataloging your own. Just to highlight a couple of things, so in version 3.0 that's out now, as of 2 weeks ago, the idea of library links. So now in version 3 of ACM, if you're calling a tank and a valve every time individually, and you know that every time you're creating your tank, you're attaching valves to it anyways, now you can link those in your library to say, when I pull a tank, I want you to also pull all the subsequent valves that I associate with it. So now you're pulling that single object assembly for code rather than each individual component. Huge time saver, like we said, much simpler workflow and no more repetitive tasks. So library artifacts. So this is your ability to, when I do pull that code down, I can also at the same time see any documents or artifacts associated with that. So whether that's every time I pull down that tank, I want to see user documentation or our company standard or something that's important to the person that's about to pull that code down. Now you can associate artifacts with your library objects. This as well says, so tag-based alarming, again, is in Logix Designer. I'll talk about how it's supported in View Designer as well. It's also supported in ACM. So anytime you're associating tags, now I have the ability to actually assign my alarm in ACM as well to that tag. It's indicated here as version 2.2, but this is so new it's worth noting. But ACM is also your place where you can check to see, I'm pulling down this object, is there a newer version or a higher version available for this object either in my library or one of Rockwell's libraries. So it's great just to double check and ensure that you're using all of the most up-to-date library objects as you pull them down. So last piece of Studio that well, I shouldn't say last, but the next piece of Studio I want to highlight is View Designer. So View Designer chose three major things in their V5 release summary that's out now. Expanded controller support with the 5510. Previously, we were limited to a single controller. Now it's up to 4 controllers in your environment. So that's a huge benefit for anyone doing system design that really couldn't be limited by a single controller environment. Again, you see the support of the tag-based alarming here in your View Designer environment. And then finally, there's productivity enhancements, mostly around graphics and being able to pull and drag and embed objects in your canvas rather than having to do, again, more repetitive tasks. So again, productivity enhancements all around simplifying how you create and how you do multiple things at once. So I mentioned that security as a part of the Studio 5000 kind of core pillars. This is really the piece that we've been waiting for from a device level security standpoint, and that is FactoryTalk Policy Manager. So anticipated next month, the kind of end of next month, is the launch of FTPM. So I made a couple notes here. Just when we talk about security, there's permission sets, which is your FactoryTalk security, to make sure that the people that are accessing the right things are the right people. This is making sure that the data going between the device, from one device to another, is the data that you think it is. It's going to the right place and it's not being interfered with. And FactoryTalk Policy Manager is that administrative console that enables that all. So you need a couple things. You need that somewhere to administer it, FactoryTalk Policy Manager. You also need devices that support the right level of communication, secure communication. I have them highlighted here. So you need FactoryTalk links to pass the secure communications, hardware that supports and has secure ports on them, 5580 controllers, the EN4TR, the Kinetix 5700, and the PowerFlex 755T. And then this is where you start to write rules for your devices, secure the communications, and then you can also do some system management, segmentation, and zoning, and manage what communication and how it's securely going from device to device. So this is a no-charge download. It will eventually be part of the FactoryTalk service platform that you download, but right now you can go get it. I shouldn't say right now. In late April, you'll be able to go get it free of charge, and it'll stay free of charge off the compatibility and download site. So that's the bread and butter studio piece, which is what's in V32, what's in V5 of UDesigner, ACM. And the rest of the studio pieces really all align around the idea of digital engineering. So I started with this slide just because I know we've seen this term thrown around a lot. It's in a lot of studies and articles and great marketing collateral, this idea of a digital twin. I want to try and start to define that a bit and then start to align what are the tangible pieces that I as an organization, as an engineer, can start to make this real. And really, if you can think of just a digital twin as just the digital representation beyond just the CAD model, but the actual behaviors, environmental responses, and mechanics and kinetics of a system, but just digitally. So we've had those component pieces for a while. We've had CAD models. We've had some plenty of CAD models have like thermal behaviors, and you have some animations to check for collisions in your CAD model. But it's linking all of those and with some PLC code and maybe even some environmental simulation to say, theoretically, how is this machine going to react in real life under real conditions and not just in a floating design space. So Gartner has a great stat here that these aren't just going to be designed anymore. These are hitting production for a lot of folks. And by 2021, they estimate that half of the industrial companies will use digital twins, and that's they estimate 10% improvement in effectiveness. Because you do talk a little bit about the different use cases, but you do see dramatic results if you can harness it.
So the fun part is for all the folks in South Louisiana, that's actually the reason I'm up here in Cleveland this week, is to learn about our FactoryTalk analytics platform. So I'll at least know more than I did yesterday.
So if we start to break down some of the cases for digital engineering, so why that all sounds great, but you really need to have some business drivers to say, why am I going to fund this? Why am I going to put manpower to it? So if I had that digital representation of a machine, what could I do? I could prototype rapidly. I don't have to worry about ordering parts, testing, doing some mock-ups. I can make changes digitally that have no physical cost to them aside from engineers' time, but certainly no floor space, no ordering parts. And then if I do have that, I can do some throughput analysis. So run some what-if scenarios and say, what if I had to change this box size or this lot size or the size of the components or the speed of my conveyor? How does that affect throughput? How does that affect getting a different order in my plant? How is that actually going to change what I can put out? I think you talk about virtual commissioning. So as we all know, commissioning always runs very smoothly and there's never any surprises and things just snap right together, but it doesn't. So once you have,
only when it's Rockwell.
Right. So more likely than not, you find lots of surprises and things don't fit, or the code runs a little differently than you thought. And the idea that, well, if I have a physical representation, I have the code, or the digital representation, I have the code that I'm going to run in it, and I can simulate my environment. Why can't I do this virtually first and find all those surprises before I ship or while it's en route, or something that doesn't mean while I'm on the floor and the customer or my site is waiting for this to turn on. And then finally, if you put all those pieces together, whether that's new operators and existing equipment that you need to bring up to speed, but you can't exactly play guinea pig on your production lines, or it's existing operators and new equipment coming in that you want to train before and not tack onto that commissioning phase and move that go live date up a little bit. The idea that using this as an operator training opportunity is huge, and certainly you can play a little bit more with conditions and time and simulate more problematic scenarios to not learn on the fly. But no, we've simulated this fault before. We know how we're going to respond to it. It's very powerful. So that sounds great. Let's turn that into something that's tangible. And what does that have to do with Studio? So if we look at the core here, so you have Studio5000 software, which is all the components we talked about. You have your controller. It's either your physical rack or an emulated controller. And I included Emulate 3D here because we're going to tie that in. But what does that new acquisition mean for Studio? So there's our core. There's everything we need to start doing some PLC programming. But at the same time, we talked about operators. They're out there training. They have some of their own software. Then you have your drawing departments and your project teams that are drawing all this stuff that you're eventually going to put in your I/O tree anyways, and all your panel layouts and everything. And then you have your 3D models. So you're putting it in Autodesk or SolidWorks or Creo. And maybe you have your mathematical model. So what if I'm running a boiler and I have some model that says, here's how my boiler behaves, or here's how this offsite asset runs under different weather conditions. So now you start to see that if you start to exchange data in between all of these, it becomes pretty powerful. Because now I can simulate my environment, I can have my operators training, I can exchange information in my CAD packages, and I can integrate my 3D models along with my PLC. Now we're starting to see how a digital twin comes to life. So if we look at that first bottom piece there, so now whether you're using ePlan or Autodesk, a lot of times you're drawing your panels, you're walking through your electrical diagrams, and then you're just recreating them in your I/O tree anyways. So with an open standard and the right tools, so Automation ML being an open standard that says, ePlan, you know what you drew, Studio, you know what you're expecting in your I/O tree. If you two exchange data, now I can draw it in ePlan, exchange it to Studio5000, and see my I/O tree populate with my devices. That's pretty powerful. So this isn't a Rockwell standard. It's an XML-based exchange format. It's compliant with IEC 62714. It has its own user base, but we've just adopted that, and so is ePlan to say that here's the way that we expect to serve up data to different pieces of software. And it was in version, I think, 30 and 31 through Architect, but in version 32 of Logix Designer, now you're exchanging information directly from ePlan to Logix Designer. So in version 32, that's the new capability for data exchange. So if I look at that same diagram again, but I say, what's in that top right? So I have mathematical modeling software, I have a boiler or whichever. How do I bring that into my Logix Designer? How do I bring that into my my Studio environment? And that functions kind of similarly, at least in my mind, an analogy to Automation ML. Those 3D modeling, or those mathematical modeling software use a different open standard, FMI, functional mockup interface. But it's the same idea that if I have something that sits in between, which we're calling simulation interface, which you saw on that second slide, as a piece of Studio, that's linking my Logix tags as inputs and outputs to various pieces of my model and vice versa. So now, if I previously wanted to simulate, maybe I went in and checked some temperature set points. Now I'm just linking my temperature tags to my model that's running a full spectrum of all different variations of and ranges of temperature, and now I'm seeing an entire scenario get played out. So simulation interface, part of Studio5000, is launching this summer, but that's that link. If anyone has mathematical models that they're trying to simulate an environment, now link it directly to your PLC logic. So the final piece here that we're going to talk about with Studio in version 32 is that upper left piece here. So SolidWorks, Autodesk, and Creo, your mechanical CAD packages. That is where, if you've seen the press release or some of the early documentation, but that is what Emulate, maybe you're even a user, but that's what Emulate 3D does. So Emulate 3D, we're an Encompass partner for years, and now an acquisition by Rockwell, is that's linking that mechanical CAD package that you had that had the physical dimensions and behaviors digitally and saying, let's assign some kinetic properties, some physics to the model, and let's link it to our PLC code, because now we're actually watching the thing that we built move based on the code that we wrote. So now now virtual commissioning is starting to really feel like something you can achieve. So now you're running your previously static or maybe slightly dynamic model, running it all on the PLC code that you're going to run in production, and you're finding how your code reacts, how your machine design reacts before you even order a single part, before you have any physical demand or space requirements, certainly before you commission. So much more to come on Emulate 3D. I just want to tie that back. Obviously, those things are all part of the studio and the design software from Rockwell. But if you say that version 32 is really the coming out party for a lot of these digital design principles, I just want to make sure that we understand how they start to pull together. I'm going to go back that slide just for a second. The nice part about this, as we explain it, as these individual pieces that you kind of link together, is that no one says, I think it'd be kind of foolish to say, we're going to do all of this now, because that's what it takes to have a digital twin. The important message is that these are pieces that you can assemble and mature through. So you can do any one of these pieces based on where you are and your demands of your company or your plant. It doesn't require that you have to do all of these and make it some insurmountable task. I really encourage everyone to take a look at what's going to be most impactful to your business, and what one of these avenues can we explore and start to build out our digital capabilities as we go. So that was a lot. I know it's hopefully a high-level summary, but that's the software in a nutshell. Leave you with some priorities. Hopefully you got an idea of the idea of adopting digital will be something that you'll see certainly in version 32 now. You're going to see more of it in version 33. A lot more to come on Emulate 3D. That's going to be part of the core DNA here as far as digitalizing and bringing up some of these huge digital engineering principles that hopefully provide a lot of value to our users. So Wayne, that's from a software standpoint, that's what I had. So I'm not sure if any questions came in. Otherwise, maybe we can move on to hardware or anything.
Yeah, no, that was great, Matt. Appreciate that. Yes, feel free to chat questions into the chat window if you want to ask, or you can always email us after the fact too if you get questions after. But we'll switch gears to a little brief Logix update. I think Luis will take it from here. So again, thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just a couple of things, and as you can ask some questions, and we'll just, no slides, just conversation, just so you guys are aware of what we're doing. So we've talked about doing Logix updates. So we now have on the compact Logix, we have both the 5370, which is the L1, L2, L3 family, and then also the 5380. One of the things that we will see within the next month, actually at the end of this month, is the new digital safety modules. So on the 5069 style IO, the digital safety, so those are the red units, will be coming out at the end of the month. For on the L8 side of the fence, when we're talking about the Logix controllers there on Control Logix side, we do also, so we have the L8 style, we do have an L8S, which is the Guard Logix. As Matt kind of mentioned, we are waiting for redundancy when it comes to an L8. So I did have Chris Watkins in the room. He ran away before I can start talking about this. So we are looking at presenting redundancy next year. So right now we're probably at around summer time frame before we start seeing something, but we are starting to introduce, and the volume rate that we have for the L8s is definitely started to go up. So as you guys from my OEM community, my system integrator community, as you guys see options of being able to transition to an L8 style compact or Control Logix where, oh look, he came in, I'll make sure to grab him right now. So yeah, as you start being able to transition, if we're looking at a simplex system, we're starting to see a huge demand for the L8s and just changing everything over. And as I've mentioned in the past, a lot of the times what you'll run across is when you run a system that used to be in an L7 and it was around 400 millisecond scan rate for the entire thing, you put it into an L8 and this drops significantly down to as much as what we've seen to 11, 20 millisecond scan rate just because of the speed issues that you're looking at. But so it's something to look at. It's we're still pushing from a Plant PX development standpoint. When we release system release 4.5, we are pushing customers documentation wise and everything to 31. So as you look at new opportunities, as you look at recommendations to your customers, I would transition. If you're looking at a redundant system, you should not be afraid of moving to Studio5000 V31. And if you're on a simplex system, especially for on my OEM side, the process skid kind of look and feel, 31, 32 is now in play. So look and see what options you fit there. You want to add anything, L8, and talk to your own crew?
Yeah, the L8 is still on flat for being a version 33 release. The time frame is still February 2020. We are pushing very strong to get that done, and a lot of the products and projects that are associated with our process initiative specifically for that. Talked about the N4 today. We talked about Policy Manager, are all leading up to getting our process initiative in full gear. There are some other items that we'll talk through later. I'm sure Luis will share with you, such as the P controllers and making sure that the functionality for our redundancy solution is stout enough to suffice as a replacement for the 5570. And if that's something you choose to do with pairing simplex now to redundancy and then having the aggregation levels you need for things like the 5094 and the 5069 and some of those feature sets that I'm sure Matt will talk about at some point with the version 33 feature set. So status quo, we're moving forward. No delays as of yet, and we'll keep in touch. Thanks.
So just so everybody heard, that was Chris Watkins, and we now have it on record since this is recorded. So he has no choice but to, no, I'm kidding. So yeah, so to that effect, like I said, so a couple of things just to note that we'll be releasing and that you guys just should be aware of. So we have the discrete safety, as I mentioned, for 5069. We have a discrete safety that's also coming out for the Flex 5000 family. That'll be in April timeframe. Matt talked about it earlier. So we have the full SIP security kind of portfolio that's going to be launching. So the Factory Talk Policy Manager will be coming up soon. And the 1756, that EN4TR that we've been talking about is the new Ethernet adapter module, is currently shipping. So we'll start talking about that more. And I think, Wayne, we have that scheduled for the following month. And then after that, we're going to be doing a discussion around Factory Talk View SE, and we'll also kind of talk around Policy Manager and how that might get affected to be able to do that type of security messaging around it. And the other big thing, just so you guys are aware, as far as I've been told, registration is now open for Tech Ed. So if you guys are not aware of that, most of my system integrators or anybody that has a toolkit usually is, but that is Rockwell's premier training event throughout the year, specifically around customers. It will be in Orlando this year, first week of June, if I'm correct. So registration is now open. If you have incentive dollars with your toolkits, make sure to get with your account managers. And if you're just interested, let us know. If you can't find the information on the website, we can always forward you some information. And for any of the topics that Matt talked about, if you guys are interested in learning a little bit more of it, especially around Application Code Manager, let us know. We'll get you in touch with our cloud-based training that we've been kind of pushing, or seeing what we could do from lab environments and things of that nature. So make sure to reach out to myself, Wayne, or Zachary so we can support you guys.
Yep, and Lisa, I do see there's a question that came in from like Charles, if you see that.
Let's see, question from, so by the way, Lake Charles, awesome job. I saw the picture of you guys. I'm gonna make sure that that becomes the record for what Wayne is putting together. So will Logix tag-based alarms be implemented, integrated into Plant PAX? So that's an interesting question. So as of right now, from what I've heard, as long as from the current setup, so the system release 4.5, We have the process library objects, which you guys know are not specifically tied to Plant PX, but are part of the bundle. And in the documentation, as of right now, that's set to still support just the P alarms because we have the redundancy set up in an L7. Going forward, that might change when we start looking at the next generation of Plant PX, but as of right now, we will continue to support the existing P alarms and that level from the HMI side of it. And one of the things I know of a system integrator that actually incorporated the Logix tag-based alarms inside of those same blocks using an L8 style, but it was for just a simplex system. So you can make modifications to the existing library and have them work and then use application code manager. But the way that it's treated right now, especially for the number of alarms that would be used in a process space, which typically we're looking at limits of 10,000 to 20,000 alarms per alarm server in an HMI environment with FactoryTalk View versus 1,000 or so when it comes to the L8 controller. That's why we're sticking as of right now with using the HMI based alarming, if that makes sense.
All right. Don't see any other questions in the chat window. We'll give everybody a chance to maybe type in a question or two. And so we will post, all the references we made mention of here on our archive page. I'll get that posted here. May not be as quick as usual, but I'll get it posted within a day or two. And if we can get a copy of the slides, we'll post that, as well as the Studio5000 32 release notes that Matt had mentioned. I'll post a copy of that, as well as maybe some other documentation around 32. So give everybody still get a chance to type. If not, as always, you can reach out to us afterwards, and we'll be happy to answer questions at any time.
Sounds good. Well, I appreciate it, guys. Right. Yeah, if something comes in, you guys know how to reach us even after the event, and then we'll look to hear from you in the future.
Yep, that's cool. So we'll go ahead and wrap up early. Want to thank Matt and Luis and Chris again for presenting. And Matt, that was really good, and that was probably one of the best things I've seen on how to actually implement digital twin in the real world. So that was pretty good to see. So we'll go ahead and we'll close it out. So appreciate everybody joining as always, and we'll see you guys again in April.
You guys have a good one.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yep. Thanks.